September 3rd, 1688. The Exchange Bank of Amsterdam, Kalverstraat, a 52-year-old merchant named Peter van der Hoeven arrives at the Exchange Bank before the doors open, as he has done most mornings for 20 years. He is not wealthy by Amsterdam standards. The truly wealthy do not need to arrive early. But he is comfortable, reliably so, in the way that Amsterdam's trading class had been comfortable for nearly a century. His grandfather had traded Baltic grain. His father had bought a stake in a VOC voyage to the Spice Islands and turned a year's profits into a decade's income. He himself has diversified. Some VOC shares, a loan to a Hamburg merchant, a small stake in a new insurance scheme, a holding in Dutch government bonds. He is, without knowing it, the most important economic figure of his age, not because of his specific wealth, but because of the specific shift his portfolio represents, away from his grandfather's model of making money by moving goods toward his own model of making money by owning financial claims on the people who move goods. It feels safer. It feels more sophisticated. The returns are more predictable than the violent uncertainty of ocean trade. Half the merchants in Amsterdam are making the same shift at the same moment for the same reasons, and it is, collectively, the single financial mistake that will end the Dutch Empire. Stay with me. The Dutch Golden Age is usually described as a story about trade, about tolerance, about the particular genius of a small nation that punched so far above its geographic weight that it controlled half the world's carrying trade from a country smaller than West Virginia. All of that is true. What is less discussed is the specific economic model underneath it, because that model, and what happened when it was abandoned, is the story that matters. The Dutch Republic in its peak decades, roughly 1600 to 1670, was not primarily a financial economy. It was a productive one. The Vloot, the Dutch cargo ship design that reduced crew requirements by 40% compared to competitors, was a manufacturing innovation that gave Dutch merchants a structural cost advantage over every other nation's shipping. The herring fishery, the textile finishing industry in Leiden, the windmill-powered sawmills and paper mills and paint mills that ringed Amsterdam, these were industries producing real things at lower costs than anywhere else in the known world. The Amsterdam Exchange Bank, founded in 1609, was built to serve this productive economy. It provided the stable currency and the reliable clearing mechanism that made Amsterdam the hub through which European trade flowed. The guilder was trusted because it was backed by real metal, and the metal was there because the trade that filled the vaults was real trade. Grain from the Baltic, spices from the Indies, cloth from the textile towns, timber from Norway. The VOC, for all its later reputation as a financial innovation, was initially funded by merchants who expected returns from actual trading voyages. The shares in 1602 were claims on future profits from buying pepper in Batavia and selling it in Amsterdam. The underlying business was physical, loading ships, navigating oceans, bargaining with suppliers, finding buyers. This is what the Dutch built, and this is what they abandoned. The shift began in the 1670s and accelerated through the early 18th century. It was not a sudden decision. It was a series of individually rational choices that collectively redirected the Dutch economy from production to finance, and that in doing so removed the engine that had made Dutch finance worth having. The mechanism was straightforward. Dutch merchants had accumulated enormous capital through 2 generations of genuinely productive trade. That capital needed to earn returns. And in the late 17th century, a new category of investment became available that offered predictable returns without the operational complexity of running ships and managing distant trading posts, government bonds. England needed money to fight Louis XIV, then more money, then more. The English financial revolution of the 1690s created a market in which Dutch capital could earn reliable returns by lending to the English crown. The Dutch had already invented most of the financial instruments involved. They were natural buyers. By 1720, Dutch investors held an estimated 25% of the entire English national debt. By 1760, some estimates put Dutch holdings of English government securities at 1/3 of the total. The money was flowing out of Amsterdam and into London, not as investment in English productive capacity, but as loans to the English state at guaranteed rates. The Dutch were not stupid to do this. English government bonds were genuinely good investments. The returns were real. The risk was low. Compared to the uncertainty of a VOC voyage where a typhoon or a war could sink your entire stake, a 4% perpetual annuity from the English crown looked like financial sophistication. Now here's the critical part. Every guilder that went into an English government bond was a guilder that did not go into Dutch industry. The Dutch textile industry in Leiden was falling behind English competition, partly because English manufacturers were investing in new techniques, partly because Dutch labor costs were rising, and partly because Dutch capital that might have funded industrial modernization was earning comfortable returns in London instead. The herring fishery was contracting. The shipbuilding yards were losing orders to English and Swedish competitors. The Dutch industrial base that had made Amsterdam the world's financial center was quietly atrophying, while the financial returns from lending to those same competitors looked perfectly healthy on paper. This is the mistake, not the specific investments, each of which was defensible. The collective shift from being a productive economy that generated wealth to being a financial economy that managed wealth, and in the process, funding the productive capacity of the competitors, who would eventually displace Dutch commercial dominance entirely. The 18th century played out as exactly the sequence this mechanism predicts. Amsterdam remained wealthy. Dutch institutions remained sophisticated. The exchange bank continued to function. Dutch investors continued to earn returns on their foreign bond holdings and their loans to European monarchs and their insurance and financial intermediation businesses. From the outside, from a financial statement perspective, the Dutch economy in 1750 looked entirely healthy. What the financial statements could not capture was the productive capacity that was no longer there. The Dutch carrying trade, which had once dominated European commerce, had been displaced by English and French shipping fleets built with capital partly provided by Dutch lenders. The Dutch industrial towns that had supplied the goods which Amsterdam traded were in long decline. The real economy underneath the financial superstructure had been hollowed out, one comfortable investment decision at a time. The political consequence arrived in the 1780s. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War of 1780 to 1784 exposed, catastrophically, the gap between Dutch financial wealth and Dutch actual power. The English Navy, partly built with capital that Dutch investors had provided to the English crown, destroyed Dutch commercial shipping with a thoroughness that shocked contemporary observers. The Dutch had financed their own displacement. In 1795, French revolutionary armies walked into the Dutch Republic with almost no military resistance. The richest nation in Europe for 150 years surrendered its independence to France without a serious fight, because the productive and military capacity required to mount a serious fight had been gradually redirected into financial returns over the preceding century. The Amsterdam Exchange Bank, which had backed the guilder with metal for 186 years, was quietly found to have insufficient reserves. Its metal had been lent out to the VOC, to the city of Amsterdam, against assets that could not be quickly recovered. The bank dissolved in 1796. The guilder's reserve currency status transferred to the pound sterling, which it held for another century before passing it to the dollar. Here is why this story matters for the world in 2025, and why a history of 18th century Dutch finance is directly relevant to the economy you live inside right now. The Dutch mistake has a name in economics. It is called the transition from a productive economy to a rentier economy, from making money by creating things to making money by owning claims on the people who create things. This transition tends to produce healthy financial returns in the medium term and productive decay in the long term, because the financial returns crowd out the investment in productive capacity that sustains the underlying economy. Every major Western economy has been running some version of this transition for the past 4 decades. America's financial sector has grown from roughly 4% of GDP in 1950 to roughly 8% today, while manufacturing has shrunk from 28% to 11%. Britain's financial sector dominates its economy in ways that have been explicitly connected to the relative weakness of its manufacturing base since at least the 1970s. Germany is the partial exception that proves the rule. The German economy's comparative strength rests substantially on its maintenance of industrial productive capacity, the thing the Dutch abandoned, and the thing everyone else has been abandoning since. The Dutch investors of 1700 were not making bad decisions by the standards of their immediate returns. They were making rational choices that collectively produced an outcome none of them individually chose: the gradual displacement of the productive economy that made their financial returns worth having. The question for any financialized economy is always the same. At what point does the financial sector stop being the servant of the productive economy and start being its substitute? The Dutch crossed that line somewhere in the early 18th century. The financial health lasted another generation. The productive decay lasted forever. This channel exists to find the line before it is crossed. Peter van der Hoeven, standing outside the Exchange Bank on September 3, 1688, was not making a mistake by any standard he could have applied to his own situation. His grandfather had taken risks that paid off. His father had taken smaller risks that paid off more reliably. He was taking the smallest risks of all on financial instruments that offered the most predictable returns. Each generation was more financially sophisticated than the last, and each generation was less productive. The sophistication and the productivity moved in opposite directions for a century until the productive base was gone, and the sophistication had nothing left to rest on. The Dutch Empire was the richest on earth for 200 years. The one financial mistake that ended it was not a fraud, not a speculation, not a reckless gamble. It was the entirely rational, entirely collective, entirely invisible choice to earn financial returns instead of building productive ones, until the productive ones were no longer available to return to. Subscribe if you want to keep tracking that line, and I want your argument in the comments. The Dutch crossed from productive to rentier economy over roughly 50 years, and the political consequences arrived 100 years after the economic ones. Given that America's financialization has been running for 40 years, where are we in the Dutch sequence? And is the productive decay already too far advanced to reverse? Drop your answer below. The clearest argument gets pinned.